Okay, with me right now is Carol Delaney, and she is a professor of anthropology who wrote an excellent book about Christopher Columbus called Columbus and the Quest for Jerusalem. And she's with me today to talk about this book and about the life and legacy of Columbus. And, I've read a lot of books about Columbus, and there are a lot of titles. But this, I think, is the only title out there, Professor, that connects Jerusalem, the holy city, the Holy Land, to Columbus. What made you come up with that kind of title?
I'm not sure how I came across that whole idea. I was reading a lot of his works, and his whole project was to get the money to fund a crusade to take Jerusalem back from the Muslims before Christ would come again.
So he was, now the thing about the Crusades, because I was prior to this program, I was doing some research about the Crusades. I think the last official crusade to the Holy Land happened maybe 200 years before he was even born. So by our contemporary notion, something that old would be forgotten and people move on, but not in his case. He still wanted to pursue a crusade,
or at least to open Jerusalem. Yeah.
Now, was that part? Now, when he wants to go to Jerusalem, he wants to sail west in order to get to Asia,
right?
China. Now, you suggest there's another reason for that also, is to try and hook up with the Chinese rulers per se and help him take Jerusalem. Right,
and of course, nobody knew anything about the American continent in the way that would stop him, because he was going across, toward America, but nobody knew about America.
Well, he thought he was always, yeah.
He was going to China.
Yeah, I thought he was off the coast of China, Japan, yeah, I guess.
Exactly. Right.
So when he lands there in what later became the Bahamas, and he runs into the natives, the Arawaks and the Tanos.
Right.
I guess he's thinking these are obviously indigenous people, but I guess he's thinking that there must be subjects of whoever the ruler is in Asia.
And so he kept wanting to, go farther on and find the mainland or whatever. He knew that was not the place.
And it's interesting that you bring up the fact that he wanted to hook up with the Grand Khan of, and I guess it's the Mongolian ruler who rules this area of Asia, to help him retake Jerusalem. Because if you read the Book of Revelation, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. You have an army from the east, it's supposed to, an army from the west. You're supposed to, retake the Holy Land, basically.
Right. Yeah, that was his motivation, definitely.
Well, contemporaries don't look at it this way, but you're kind of unique about this. Yeah, what made you take this approach?
Well, I don't think people know about his motivation or the way that Jerusalem fit into it at all. Most people don't know anything about that. I think they just, thought he was looking for some new country or something. I don't know what they think. I really don't.
Religious was just so important to him. I guess we just overlooked that, how important religion was to him.
Right.
This might be a reason why he named all the when he landed in the islands, he named them after saints and
right
this aspect. Yeah.
No, he was a very religious person.
When you also one criticism that's lodged against Columbus was people see him as this profiteer, this exploiter of the natives, this exploiter of the environment, and speaking to you just off camera, you reject that notion. Basically, you don't see him as that kind of exploiter or profiteer.
Absolutely not. No, he was not going to do that. As I just mentioned, thought he was going to China and get the gold to fund a crusade to take Jerusalem back from the natives. And so when he met these people, he was very friendly with them. He learned the language. He adopted the son of one chief as his godson, and that young man traveled with him on his other voyages. And Columbus learned the language, Taino. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation. He was a good guy, and he's being blamed for things he simply didn't do.
Well, did he? Did he enslave the people?
No, of course not. No, never. That was people who came later, Spaniards who came later, enslaved.
So
But
why wouldn't he do that? Just out of what's the motivation as to why he would not do that in your research? What makes you, just besides the evidence that he didn't do it, what makes you think that his mindset would forbid him to do that?
Well, he thought he was going to China to meet the Grand Khan. There's no intention of enslaving anybody. That was not at all part of the mission.
Well, when he lands on those islands and then further, he puts, first thing he does is he kisses the ground. He thanks God for allowing him to survive and find this island. The next thing he does, he claims it for Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. Is that a conquering action by him, or is that something else that's going on?
I think it's not really a conquering thing, but it's mainly to say that they're sort of claiming that they discovered it. They discovered it, but
yeah, so I mean, discovering means that belongs to you. Is that what as he sees it when he lands in some place like Cuba, for instance, or someplace like that?
Or at least that they have the right to maybe colonize it and protect it. Both of those things, I think.
Did he, when he lands in these islands, is he thinking that this is also belongs to the Grand Khan, or this belongs to whoever the ruler is of Asia at that time? I
think so. I mean, he thought he was on. I think he thought he was on the outskirts of China and still trying to find the Grand Khan, which of course was not possible.
One criticism of him is that he's there, and when you read his diary. I mean, when you read his diary, he is saying, gee, I hope when I come to this part of an island somehow, I'll be able to find gold. He seems to be obsessed by that purpose. I guess to pay for expenses. But you also suggest he was looking for gold for other reasons, perhaps religious reasons as well.
Yes, I think so. I mean, Marco Polo, he knew that Marco Polo had found some gold, and so he was looking for it too, to finance the voyage, but also probably to finance the crusade at some point.
This was
certainly not for personal gain. It was not at all for personal gain.
You mentioned about this, the way going back and looking at the time frame Columbus. In your book, it's really quite interesting. It's a very well written book.
Thank you.
It flows very well, and the reader has no problem in understanding the language and just flowing along with this amazing book.
Good.
And your research is phenomenal. I think you probably have. I tried to count the number of sources you had in the bibliography. I lost count. After 200, I lost count, I guess. So,
I should have reread it before this interview. I should have looked at it again. I tried a little bit.
My goodness. So how many years did you spend researching this whole, just the number of books that you read and stuff? How long did you spend on it?
I don't know. That's a very good question. I think I spent a year, or let me just take a look at my CV. I think I spent a year at Harvard doing some research, and some other places. I went to Spain also to do some research, and to Italy. And then I don't know how long it took me to write the book. Certainly more than a year.
I bet, sure. Yeah, well, a lot of information included there. You really spent a lot of time in the religious aspects of it, and I think one event that you talked about why it was so important was, Columbus is born, and a few years after he's born, you have the fall of Constantinople. Explain to us a little bit about that situation, why that was so important.
That was really important because it fell to the Muslims, and Constantinople had to be back in Christian hands because it was on the way to Jerusalem. And so they were outraged that it had been conquered by Muslims.
Now, Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine religious order.
Empire, and on the way to Jerusalem, so it had to be back in Christian hands, according to Columbus and many other people at that time. And it was outrageous that it had been taken over by the Muslims.
So he's in his teens and his 20s. This is an event that occurred that had major impact on their history at that time.
Right.
I guess it'd be equivalent to the fall of the Berlin Wall or the end of World War II or something like that, where it's in a big event. You might be when you're a child, this might have happened, but nevertheless, it's carried over and it still has major impact on it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
When he the fall of Constantinople. I mean, people who read the Bible, the last book is the book of Revelation. So, and from what I gather from, and you mentioned this in your book also, how important that part of the Bible was to him. He's reading this and he studied it. He's a master of it, obviously. It's the whole concept of the end of times, the apocalypse. And he believes that this is happening while he's alive and well, and he wants to do something about it.
Well, Jerusalem had to be back in Christian hands. And that was why, it had been taken over by the Muslims. And so part of the whole impetus for his voyage was to secure enough funds to finance a crusade to take Jerusalem back from the Muslims. That was that was his motivation.
Why would he want to take Jerusalem specifically as relates to, Revelation and stuff? Well, why would he want to take Jerusalem?
Because that's where Christ was supposed to return.
To the temple, that whole area, right?
Yeah, right. And it was in the hands of Muslims. So in order to get rid of them, he needed money to fund a war, I guess, to get them out.
He, so in go back to the fall of Constantinople, he's probably seeing that perhaps equivalent to Revelation, the idea of the fall of Babylon.
Apocalypse.
Yeah, the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
So he's looking at him and a bunch. So he and his contemporaries, educated contemporaries, are seeing this happening. They believe probably the Muslim ruler, whoever he is, who took Constantinople, is probably the Antichrist, as specified in the book of Revelation.
They had to regain Jerusalem. Definitely, that was part of the motivation.
Now, this is of interest to you specifically because I think before you wrote about Columbus, because you're an anthropologist, you were studying the perception of apocalypse for the millennial. And this is kind of what got you interested in Columbus. How did that come about?
I think I must have come across some passage in some of my readings about Columbus and his apocalyptic kind of beliefs. And I thought, what? I never heard about any of that. And so that started me on the research.
And your intention was never to write about Columbus. This was kind of almost by accident. It almost occurred.
It was definitely by accident. Yeah. It had never been on the horizon for me until I came across, those couple of little sentences, basically, that his whole goal was to reclaim Jerusalem, take it back from the Muslims.
He must have been a very ambitious person. I mean, the fact that not only does he want to sail west, but he also wants to go on this holy crusade to.
And also very religious, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. They sort of think of him as money grubbing or something. I don't know. Yeah. But it was definitely religious motivation that launched the voyages. Absolutely.
Well, he just give us an idea just about that, about how religious a person it was in his daily life. What would it be to be Columbus? You wake up in the morning. What's the first thing you do? Do you pray?
Say your prayers. Definitely.
Right. But he's just living every moment of his life is living through the prism of he wants salvation, to spread the gospel. I mean, this is just basically what a devout Catholic would do, and he's very devout at that time because that's all he knows. That's all anybody knows.
And that was his motivation. He's in that motivation. That's for the voyage. That was part of it. Definitely. A big part of it, I would say. It was the motivation.
Why what makes you think why contemporaries today, historians like yourself, but they overlook this? Because, you write about that. I read a bunch of books. They only mention rarely his beliefs. It's always in the context that he might have lived with a monk or something like that, but nothing really too serious.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I don't know why they don't go a little bit farther. Why was he going there? What was the purpose? I mean, it's in his writings. So they should see that he was going there to get the money to fund a crusade, to take Jerusalem back from the Muslims before the end of the world. And people thought, I don't think he was the only one, but I think people thought the end of the world was coming.
I mean, some people think that now. I mean, you run into very religious people. Yeah, and they think.
And you could think it now, yeah.
Yeah. So definitely, yeah. I mean, but I mean, if this is his approach, it's interesting because if he shows up and this natives are there and indigenous people, primitive people, I guess the first thing that he's going to think is that they need to be baptized.
Mm-hmm. I mean, first of all, he was very friendly with them. He learned the language. And I think I said the son of one chief became his godson and traveled with him. And Columbus wanted these people to be saved, and therefore they had to be baptized and taught the religion. And that was part of the whole project. And he wanted priests to be sent over to, educate them and give them communion and so forth.
This was normal practice back then. When you ran into people who were not baptized, you tried to baptize them, proselytize them. And
well, maybe it wasn't the goal for everybody, but it certainly was Columbus's goal.
Columbus was unique of his time too, because he was one of the few people who could read and write. So what he would do, he must have read all the religious texts back then and other things. And this made him unique among many people of his day. So he was the person who came to this approach with considerable education.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I don't know if he had any formal education, or if so, what it was. It's been a long time since I did my research, so I don't remember a lot of the, particulars. But he was definitely very smart and read a lot. And
where are these
the Bible?
Right. Where do these accusations come from? In fact, he was a slave trader. He was. Some things.
It's crazy. I don't know where they come from. I really don't. They're sort of thinking, I guess, that he was like the forerunner of the ones who did become like that afterwards. But that was not at all. He never enslaved anybody. And I want that said loud and clear. Columbus never enslaved anybody. He was friends with them. He learned their language. As I said, the son of a chief became his godson and traveled with him. And he learned the language. I mean, it's amazing.
Nothing in his writings at all would indicate that he didn't enslave them, maybe wanted to enslave them, or
no,
anything of that part? Memos,
nothing.
or whatever?
Nothing that I have come across whatsoever.
Well, that's interesting because these accusations are lodged against them, and yet
I know
when you delve into the sources of it, some people just list maybe 2 or 3 sources, maybe 9, whatever it is, sources. But you have obviously yours is far, far more in depth, and you're stating basically, no, he never did any of these crimes or did these awful things that people claim that he did.
Not at all. No.
And that would come into this is religious beliefs also. That would be consistent with just his belief of the do what God, to walk in God's path, not hurt anyone or harass anyone or anything of that effect. Right.
No, I mean, I came to like him as a person the more I read by him and what his ideas were and what his motivations were. And I think it's the people who've come after who've read nothing probably about him and just are blaming him for things he simply didn't do. I think he was a good guy.
I think you devoted the book to him, didn't you? I mean, you basically, you devoted the book.
Let me see what I did. Did I do that? Yes, I did. To Columbus, whose extraordinary journey made mine possible. So, Columbus, I hope you hear it.
Have you ever gone back to Spain and Italy to revisit some of the sites that you went to in order to research the book?
I don't know. I mean, it's not on my agenda at the moment, and I'm not planning to write another book about him.
What are you writing? What book are you writing now? Are you involved writing another book, or?
I'm sort of doing it's not really an autobiography, but what would you call it?
A memoir?
A memoir, yeah. So this would figure into it, of course, but that's more. And so far the title is Against the Odds, because when I was growing up, girls were not supposed to go to college or graduate school or become professors. So I think against the odds.
You spent your time in anthropology. What attracted you to anthropology?
Well, I think I wanted to learn about other cultures. I was invited to be part of a couple of archaeology projects, but I decided that's not what I wanted to do. I was not interested in the stones and the bones, but in the people who lived in the communities right there. I was involved in several archaeological projects in Turkey, and I became much more interested in the people who were living in the little villages where we were doing our archaeology work, and that's what turned me on to becoming an anthropologist.
And then I went in Turkey also. You were living. You were in a village, I think, wasn't it? Where you were in Turkey, and that kind of affected you as well.
Yeah.
With a different approach to Columbus. Explain to us a little bit about what your experience there was.
I don't know exactly. I mean, I guess it was probably more like the kind of environment that he might have been very familiar with, living in a little village, top of a mountain someplace, or even not on a mountain, but, mud brick house, that's what I had. No stores, nothing like that. People grew all their own food, and they took care of their animals. So no big city.
You mentioned how everybody there was Muslim, obviously, and they just looked at everything as the will of God and just everything happening towards God. And so that kind of gave you some sort of, you wrote it in the book about how that gave you an incentive, basically, to maybe view Columbus in a similar way. Different religions, obviously.
Yeah, right. Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, you're a very good writer, though. I mean, you wrote books before this, of course, but what I thought was quite impressive of the book was just how well it flows and how well written it was.
Oh, thank you.
And that's something that I thought was very good as well.
Thank you. Yes, I have written a couple of other ones. Abraham on Trial, about the story of Abraham. Terrible story.
Oh, yeah?
Well, Abraham is revered because he's willing to sacrifice his son.
Yeah.
And then our religion starts with God sacrificing his son. Anyway.
Well, that's indicative of how much time you know about religion, and that's the knowledge of religion that you had came in handy in writing this book.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I had been at Harvard Divinity School, not to become a minister, but to do some of that research.
Interesting.
Because the book before that is Abraham on Trial. A critique of the story of Abraham.
You must have visited the Holy Land? I mean, have you visited that area?
I have not been to Jerusalem or the Holy Land, no. I've been to what is now Iraq and Turkey, but not to Israel. I have not been to Israel.
Very interesting. Well, it's a very interesting thesis that you've come up with. And it's, a lot of Italian Americans, we're looking to different sources and different authors and experts to try and counter these claims that people are making against Columbus. And there's just so many of them. And after a while, you know how it is, almost hearsay becomes the situation. And
that's right.
Don't know why they're even coming up with these accusations against him. And it's
crazy because he was just the opposite of what they're sort of trying to portray him as. He was not there to go enslave people or do anything like that at all. And he was friends with them, as I said. He learned their language. He was a good guy. I would have liked to have met him.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's far different than what most people are saying. And it's just,
I know.
Yeah.
So, anyway. I know. Most people are accusing him of all kinds of horrible things that he absolutely never did.
How about that? Nothing at all that the accusations are true, in other words.
No, absolutely not.
Wow. Have anybody of who's contacted you to maybe talk with you about that, of the opposite side, those that are making
No, they're probably afraid to. I don't know. But they're wrong. I don't even know where they get that idea.
Really? There's nothing in the written record at all, in any of the things you've read, that would claim that?
No.
About that?
In all of his writings, he just talks very well about the people. And as I said, he learned their language. He adopted the son of one of them.
Well, what about that? I read one where he actually took some natives to come with him as guides and to go back to. Was that by force? I mean, maybe that was that kidnapping.
He said more wanted to go. They were very interested in the ships. They wanted to go on the ship. And yes, he did take some back to Spain. They were not enslaved. I want to make that very clear. I think he took 8 or 9, something like that, back to Spain to sort of introduce them to the sovereigns and, let the sovereigns see what he had discovered. But they were definitely not enslaved. And I think some of them just... Though. No. He said more wanted to go. But he couldn't take a whole bunch. He only had, his little ship. I think he took 8 or 9 back. I think it was 8 or 9. And then when they got back, they were introduced to the Queen Isabella, and they were all Christianized. And several of them decided they wanted to stay. And I think only 1 or 2 returned with him back to Hispaniola.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
I can't remember. I should have reread my book before.
Sure. No, it's just so. Columbus is such a complex figure. I mean, he was he's just probably one of the most. I mean, do you still believe that he's probably one of the most important figures of history? I mean, people then. Yes, I see.
Absolutely, and he's being blamed for things he absolutely never did.
What about some of these claims that maybe other people? We know about the Vikings, but other people from other societies, from other parts of history, discovered the New World, and that Columbus doesn't even deserve credit for that. What do you think about that at all?
Well, of course, there were people living here before he came.
Right.
But I don't know of anyone else who discovered the Americas before him. Any European. Nothing
in your reading at all about the history of the exploration. Nothing like that.
Mm-mm.
And you read a lot. I mean, you've researched a lot. So, I mean, anybody who reads your book, you can look back at a bibliography that's pretty intense.
Yeah, and I think I cover some of that business, and I should have reread some of it before I talked with you, just to make sure I was saying the right things. But first of all, I want to make it very clear, he never enslaved anybody. The 6 people or whatever that he took back on the first voyage, after the first voyage, all of them were presented to the king and queen. They were all Christianized. Some decided to stay. The other ones returned back with him on the second voyage.
And anything that happened afterwards, when he died or after he no longer went there to the New World, that's when probably maybe some of the persecution occurred, but didn't happen to his wife.
No. I think people who came later probably did some of that stuff, but certainly was not Columbus.
Interesting. That's a very important claim, and that you're making. I appreciate that because it's good to have someone like yourself who's done so much research, so much time on this subject to make that defense of him.
No, I thought he was a good man. I would have liked to have met him, and maybe I will.
Well, I want to thank you very much for spending time with me today. And again,
thank you.
Columbus: The Quest for Jerusalem is it's an excellent book. I recommend it highly. I've read it already. I'm on my 3rd time. It's just quite fascinating. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great information.
I should reread it again too.
Well, good for you. Absolutely. Well, you wrote it and you reread it, so that definitely you know more than anybody, I guess, in that respect.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
Delight to talk with you.
Columbus: The Quest for Jerusalem. Great book for us to read in order to really get a better understanding the state of mind of Columbus.
And also to continue to commemorate Columbus Day. People are trying to get rid of Columbus Day.
And you think we should celebrate Columbus? It should be a federal holiday. We should celebrate it.
Of course, yeah. And educate people about him. I mean, we wouldn't be here without him.
Very true.
Well, if somebody else would have come across later, then it would be something else. But he was a good guy, and I want people to know that he did not go marauding and raping and doing horrible things.
No, that's great. That's good news to hear.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor, for being here with me today. And we look forward to maybe speaking with you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.